I do want to go back on something I said a minute ago, though. I said, like, in the comments, people would insult me by saying, go back to the strip club. And that's such a big part of slut shaming as well. It's the shaming of sex work as well,
Yeah.
right? Sex work is so complex and it is such a hard thing to do. In my experience as a pole dancer, I have encountered many people that are sex workers, and they all have incredibly complex stories and incredibly different backgrounds. But the common denominator is it's hard, man. And they have these people paying them to do their job and then turn around and publicly shame them for doing that job. And I think that is linked to sexual liberation as well, right? The idea that you want to be able to access that service and be able to have women be sexual for you. But then if they do it for themselves, that is not okay suddenly.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I also cannot imagine the vastness of not even slut shaming. I think in terms of sex workers, it goes for many cases far beyond the limit of slut shaming. It's such a double standard as well, right? As you were just saying, it's only okay as long as you're oppressed by me, like as long as you're doing
Yeah,
it
exactly.
for me. I think that that's the case a lot of the times, where sex workers are generally oppressed in such an aggressive way, and dehumanized as well to a certain degree, not to a certain degree, very much dehumanized,
Totally.
from the people who use these services, right? Or who want these services.
I think the big issue is actually in that definition, is that we see it as a service, they see the people as goods. Oh my god, I've made Costi speechless. I feel so proud. But yeah, like, I mean, we're in business school. We
Yeah.
talk about goods and services all of the time, and there is one crucial difference between the two. And those misogynists, slut shamers, etc., lose that difference. And it all merges into one nice little bundle that they can manipulate and use however they want, because that's not a person, that's just a sex worker. It should be considered the same, where you hire them to do something and they do the thing. And then that's that. You have no power over them beyond that. But we're not there yet.
Oh no. I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a topic change there, but there is one other thing I want to talk about in the world of slut shaming. It's this idea of a swinging pendulum, right? And we've had purity culture on one side, and now we're pushing all the way back with sexual liberation, and the pendulum has started swinging back with intense slut shaming. And this pendulum motion is visible in everything, right? Anytime you push too far out of people's comfort zones, they will push back the other way massively. The same can be seen in politics, in honestly, literally any situation you look at. Make people uncomfortable and they'll push back twice as hard. And now that we're pushing back with slut shaming, it's going to last a couple years, couple decades, however long. And eventually the pendulum will start swinging back into intense liberation that will make everyone uncomfortable. And the issue is that we just aren't able to stay in the middle, right? Like, if you keep swinging the pendulum, there will always be people being oppressed for their behavior. Because even at the peak of sexual liberation, you would then get shamed for the other thing. You'd get shamed for not wanting to have sex because what are you, a prude? And that just wasn't okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this concept also ties within the topic of people needing a lot more education on unconscious bias. Because I think that the reason why people push back is because they don't have the tools to understand why they're uncomfortable with it. So back to the leggings example, right?
Yeah, we're back to it.
Yeah, we're back to the leggings. Why was I uncomfortable some time ago, like a few years back, with other people wearing leggings the way that I wasn't allowed to growing up? I didn't know back then, and I now know, I now understand that it is because of a certain way that I grew up.
Yeah.
And I think that the same way can go for the reason why people want to sort of push back against liberation, or like kind of swing the pendulum back. I think that a lot of people's uncomfortableness lies within not being able to understand where it comes from.
It's as you said, they don't have the tools to decipher what's going on in their brains, and then that scares them off, and they just go, and push
Exactly.
back.
Exactly. And I think if we talk about slut shaming, we also have to talk about what we can do to
Yeah.
kind of,
We're not here to doom call, right?
Exactly.
The goal is to present solutions.
Exactly. And I think that it all comes down to, it doesn't all come down to, obviously, there's much more work to be done. But one thing that I think is extremely important is to understand where the root of the problem is. And the root of the problem is with what we spoke about in the beginning, that it's not just about the topic of the slut part of slut shaming, but also much more the topic of shaming for any kind of, for anything, right? And the fact that for us it also comes from growing up, which is all things that tie with an unconscious bias again and again and again. And sorry. And
I feel like you like this topic.
do you think so?
Just a hunch.
I don't know, actually. No, yeah, but I really do think that it's extremely important. And in my opinion, one thing that would genuinely change not only the topic of slut shaming, but generally so many topics about equality and inclusion that we speak about on a daily basis, is education on your own unconscious bias from when you're little. Being able to understand what unconscious bias is, because let's be honest, it's gonna be difficult to really change all of the basic structures that our society operates on, because the fact of being also gendered, for example, in two binary genders, starts before you're even born.
Yeah.
And all the stereotypes about genders, yada yada yada, start when you're really young.
Kids watch a lot and observe a lot and absorb a lot, and they understand so much more than you think. And that is when you have to tackle those things.
Exactly. And I genuinely think that if we started educating kids on these topics, that we would see a very different society after only a few generations, if I'm being honest.
Totally.
And I feel like that's, tad unrealistic to speak about right now. But hopefully we will reach a time when it will become some sort of normality, perhaps.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. But in the meantime, obviously we're saying it's hard to reach. We're not saying it's impossible to reach. There is nothing you can do. There are things you can do in your everyday life beyond just dissecting your own unconscious biases that will help make other people look at theirs and help kind of stop their comments and their reflections from having an effect on people. The first of those is, don't let people say things like that. So many people will let things be said so long as it's not about them, because but that's just how they are. And that's such a harmful belief, because yes, that's just how they are. But if they're like that about other people, then they're like that about you and about every single person. And just because it isn't you doesn't make it less bad. So when you hear comments like that being made, the first step is step up and go, hey, that's not right. And explain to them, I'm not saying you have to educate them. That's not your job as a person. You shouldn't educate grown adults. But saying, even one of my favorite things to do, and I know that's gone online a few times, is when someone makes a bad, sexist, slut-shaming joke, I just go, I'm sorry, I don't get that. Can you explain? And having to be faced with why they think this is funny takes them apart. They're just like, no, never mind. And I think it's hilarious every single time.
I love that. And I do want to touch upon the fact of speaking up, because I think that it's incredibly important. And I also think we need to acknowledge that it is difficult to speak up about these things. I know myself that I've had a lot of opportunities to speak up where I haven't because I was scared of it. And I think that for me, that's starting to change after I did speak up a few times, got the opportunity to speak up a few times. And once you do start doing that, it feels so good and feels so rewarding. And I think even if you have protected in some sort of way one person, even if you've had slightly changed the perspective of one human being, I think that's already a reward enough, or already justifiable enough for you to keep doing it.
And on the other side, if you are the victim, if you have received comments like this, the biggest part, other than, hey, can you explain, is not letting yourself internalize it. It's realizing that it says a lot more about that person than it says about you, right? Whenever someone criticizes you for something that's really not worth criticizing over, it doesn't say anything about you. It's about their vision of the world and their biases. We're back to them again. But yeah, if you internalize it, then you will start to unconsciously transfer that issue onto others. If you keep your emotional distance from any comments like these that you receive, you'll be able to keep fighting them and not become them. Yeah.
And on that topic, I can also really suggest, if you want to read up more about it, the book Women Don't Owe You Pretty. It talks a lot about these topics, right? And it's a really interesting read. It's also a fairly simple read. It's not like a very heavy book. So if you're interested.
Nice. Look at us coming in with the literature.
There you go.
But yeah, so that's some concrete things that you can do, like in your day-to-day, right? Analyze your own biases, speak up against others, and when it is said to you, don't let it become you. But the end goal, and that kind of sums up everything we've said this episode, right, is sexual neutrality. We've had sex negativity with purity culture. We've had sex positivity with sexual liberation movements. But even those always push too hard, and eventually the goal should be, and always is, sexual neutrality, where people are free to exist one way or another, and they're not judged because they want to do or don't want to do something, where sex is not a taboo topic, and you can just talk about it with no judgment attached. And of course, that's a huge goal. And I'm not saying if you do those two things, then in like 3 years, everyone will be free. It's so much harder than that. But even as you do your little goals and you do your little part, I think it's always so important to keep the end goal in mind.
I completely agree with that. And I think that's a beautiful conclusion to our first episode. So thank you, everyone, for listening to us.
And if you've got other topics you want us to talk about in the future as well, we've got a few lined up. Don't worry, we're not just one and done. But if you've got things you really want us to approach, don't hesitate to leave that in the comments as well. We are more than happy to talk about what people want to talk about. Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case,
that being said,
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
we'll see
Kirsty.
you in the next one.
See you guys later.